So the Queen died last night. Rest in pink, rest in peace. The most stylish of all of our grandmas. And if you are British, you may have woken up this morning to a WhatsApp chat and a news feed that demonstrated that, unbeknownst to you, at least half of your friends and family have been in a parasocial relationship with the Queen this whole time. Let's talk about it. Now, while I honour all of the people who are genuinely mourning and feeling sad, that is a valid feeling, you're allowed to feel it, just as I am allowed to not feel it at all. I want to talk a little bit about what I think I'm about to face, which I would probably call comp mourn. Just like comp het, compulsory heterosexuality, I think in Britain we are about to experience something called compulsory mourning. And I wanted to offer 4 points as to why I feel like that isn't fair to expect of people, and I would like to offer 4 little thought experiments that I have that I invite you to have with me if you are confused why people aren't sad about the Queen dying, or if you aren't sad about the Queen dying but you feel like you have very complicated feelings about it. Perhaps some of my feelings will clarify yours. I would love to hear your own ones in the comments. And now I'm also a little bit of a socialist. I believe in workers' rights, and I believe in those for me as well. It is Friday morning, mid-Friday morning, as I talk to you right now, and I'd like to get this up on Monday, but I would also deeply desire for myself a weekend. So this is going to be brief, it's going to be pretty unedited, and I would love to unpack more of my feelings as I have before on the channel about the royal family. And so yes, let's just go, shall we? Let's just let out our feelings. What is YouTube for? This isn't TV. We're just allowed to say what we're feeling. So the first thing about this I wanted to chat about was this idea of forced mourning in general. Now, I think that grief is an incredibly complicated thing, and when you didn't truly know the person, as none of us could have, let's recognise that the Queen wasn't somebody that gave extended interviews. She wasn't somebody who knew any of her subjects in a real personal sense, although she met a lot of them, and she was somebody who was inherently very private. Arguably not by choice. A lot of the things around the royal family are to do, I think, with basic human rights, and I don't think that giving somebody riches in exchange for their human rights is a fair exchange. But that's a story for another day. But I do feel like she symbolised a lot of things to people, and I understand that. I'm not a stranger to the idea of symbolic mourning. We saw this a lot with lots of celebrities that have died over the past 5 years. One springs to mind is Prince. I really felt for the people who are mourning Prince. He gave them so much, he symbolised so much for them, and people really felt like they knew him even though they didn't, and that's okay. And I think to a certain extent you can know somebody through their artistic work to a certain extent, and you're also mourning the loss for you, the loss of no more Prince albums, the loss of no more books by your favourite author. Now, I wouldn't say that the Queen was prolific when releasing things that gave people hope. She did give us a few speeches, a few smacking quotes, but in general her role was incredibly symbolic, and it was forced to be so. And I think when you are mourning somebody, it's completely okay to do that, but it's not okay to force other people to. Just like nobody who was a Prince fan in my life forced me to go to a Prince memorial. That wouldn't make any sense because I didn't really like Prince. I didn't really know that much about Prince's work. You can't expect other people to feel how you are feeling about a death, especially when it was somebody as estranged and I use the word estranged in the strongest sense of the word, from the people of this country. Which brings me on to point 2. You are mourning a symbol, and the symbol means something different to everybody. I've been talking to lots of people in the Gumption Club today who are the patrons, and we have like a little secret Facebook group, and I chat to them about what's going on in the world, and a lot of people were voicing some interesting feelings. One around how maybe they've lost a parent or a grandparent recently, and it's brought up a lot of those feelings, which is completely understandable. But for also people who have heritage in countries that were pillaged by the royal family, and what the Queen symbolised, are feeling very, very jaded and confused. And I also understand that, and I think that there should be room for people to be very angry about people's reverence for the symbol of the Queen, because while she may have been very nice, we'll get onto that later, what she symbolised and what she enacted and what she presided over wasn't fair. It wasn't fair, it has never been fair, and has never been just. What I think it also brings up for a lot of people, I grew up Christian Christian, but even if you didn't, is the contradictions within the Queen's position when it comes to her inherent justification for being there. Like, right, the whole point of the Queen is that she is defender of the faith and she has been chosen by God to be there. That's literally the justification for having a royal family. However, most, well, I would almost say most, all the Christians that I grew up with and have actually read the text of the Bible would say that it's not biblical to say that, and I think it's more lent on this kind of Georgian and Victorian mythology around, you know, that song used to sing, all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small. Well, do you remember the line that was, the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, God made them high or lowly and ordered their estate. This idea that there is a God somewhere who thinks that some people deserve more because they're born to a certain family. We can have a religious discussion in the comments, but that wouldn't be a God that I would follow in any way. And that's okay, we're all different. But when it comes to this idea of anointedness and that this idea that somebody can be born to preside over people who are literally suffering and dying because they don't have enough food and enough money, it's gross. And I understand why people might feel like they can't mourn a symbol like that, especially in this time. And because the royal family has been so much part of our lives collectively as British people, for better or for worse, I would say emphasis on the worse, especially for those of us whose ancestors didn't come from Britain, it would definitely, I'd say on balance, worse. It isn't an insult to the past to not replicate it. You can still understand the past, see the past as something that is interesting and valuable to learn about, but you don't honour the past by bringing it forward. What I see at the moment of people crying at the gates of Buckingham Palace almost feels like a historical reenactment to me. Like, it almost feels like one of those peasants mourn their abuser kind of thing. Not that the Queen was abusive, but the system within which she lived, and arguably some of the people that she protected with her money. Looking at you, Prince Andrew, potential, probable, alleged paedophile. It just makes things so complicated. And I don't think that if you grew up with the kind of Christianity that I did, which was basically borderline Marxist, like, I couldn't believe when I grew up and like realizing that people could be conservative and Christian, because they seemed like contradictions to me. But when we look at the Queen as defender of the faith, it feels horrifying, because I understand that she was a Christian. She seemed to have a very, very real faith, but the idea that she was following somebody who called themselves the servant king, and that this idea of service didn't involve helping the people financially with what they were going through, seems contradictory to Jesus's message in literally every way. Like, Jesus didn't even have a house. Jesus didn't even have a change of clothes. What's this? So I think there's also space to be held for people who feel like the Queen being the head of the Christian church is an inherent contradiction in itself. And then number 3 is this idea of like, oh, but she was a really good person, she was very kind, she did her service very well. And that is not the question that we are asking. I'm not asking whether the Queen was nice or not. I'm assuming that she was really nice, but that's not what we're asking. She obviously fulfilled a service. She worked incredibly hard. She worked herself into the ground. Learning anything about royal tours and what it takes sounds frankly grueling / borderline workers' rights abuse. But we have to also recognize that labour is only valuable because of the mythology around her being more special than us. That labour isn't, it's invented labour because we see that labour as something that we need to get hope and validate our own projects. And again, it's I think a lot of the stuff around meeting the Queen is almost like you've met a magician or something. You've met somebody who's been touched by something really special. And again, I think that's something that we will see us as a nation, and I hope we grow out of that idea that some people are magic because a god that frankly a high percentage of the UK population don't believe in or follow has touched somebody more than they might have touched somebody who is homeless and sitting on the street. That is, when I was a Christian, I found that incredibly, it made me really angry, almost, I don't want to say insulted, but it made me feel like fire in the belly. It made me feel fire in the belly. Yes, the Queen might have been an incredibly selfless and kind and nice woman, but she didn't dismantle any of the systems that kept other people in suffering in the way that she could have. I don't believe that charity counts, because charity is something that where people still hold the power and can take it away at any moment. This kind of philanthropy thing, I don't jam with. That's not an argument that works for me. But she didn't dismantle any of those things that kept people poor. And I also just feel like even if she was a nice person, it doesn't protect us from the random genetic selection of having people have this huge amount of land and ownership and power over other people, because that is what it is over other people. It doesn't stop anybody from being born who would take the throne afterwards and be completely evil. And there are some people in the royal family that I have huge questions about, including Charles. Anyway, the last point I want to make is that the Queen was right when she said she can't bring about justice for the people. I actually kind of think that she knew some of this. I'd love to have heard her own opinions, but we'll never hear them because human rights abuse. She couldn't say her own she couldn't say her own feelings, literally couldn't. She said, "I cannot lead you into battle. I cannot give you laws or administer justice, but I can do something else. I can give you my heart and my devotion to these old islands and to all the people of our brotherhood of nations." I wouldn't describe Britain's power over other countries as a sibling relationship, but in general this is a lovely sentiment and actually recognises something that I think is very key about her power that maybe she would agree with, that she can't bring about justice. She doesn't have any real power in the UK, contrary to the beliefs of a man that I shared a Greyhound bus seat with for like 10 hours once when I was in Nevada, and it transpired that he genuinely thought the Queen ran the UK, and he started explaining democracy to me and how good it was and how we should get a parliament. Anyway, she doesn't run the country. She doesn't have that much material political power, although she does own a lot of land, and that is as material as power gets in my opinion. But the people who can do all of those things, lead us into battle against corruption, give us laws and administer justice, are about to use her death as an excuse to not give us those things. And that's the thing I think we should be talking about, and the thing we should be focusing on when it comes to talking to our friends and family about the Queen. The idea of halting Parliament, the idea of stopping some of these processes that are going to alleviate some of the pain caused by the economic and energy crisis is in direct contradiction to what it would seem the Queen would have wanted. If she really cared about her citizens, if she really cared about you, she would want you to protest for your livelihoods, for your right, for your fair pay. And this idea that we are going to be stopping picketing, stopping protesting, and stopping pushing the government to push the brakes on at least some of the pain that is hurtling towards most main members of our society is disrespectful, I think, to her. I don't know what the Queen believed about human rights and justice. I don't know. But when she used that word, I assume she meant your life matters and you deserve to live, and live fairly and justly and comfortably. If you really believe that the Queen was a nice person and you are mourning her, don't cancel your protests, don't cancel your anger, don't let your Prime Minister cancel any kind of work that she needs to do right now. Do it in her name. If you really believe the Queen cared about you, protest in her name. Daniel J. Layton made a really good Instagram post that I will link that gave me a lot to think about. He talked about this idea of patriotism being outdated and the monarchy being strapped to that, and how he wants to feel proud of his country, the country that he grew up believing in, that was just and fought for things and was excited to be itself and not abuse anyone else, is a country that was largely of fantasy, but something that I think the kind of naughties really brought to us. Thank you, Jerry Halliwell, and your dress. He said it, that has a lot to answer for it, but he said something that really moved me, and I think while we go through this identity crisis as a country, I hope we come out of it believing less in the royal family and more in ourselves. He said, "Losing the constant of modern history is going to present a lot of questions that I hope we can answer. We can choose to be a force for good if we want to. I hope we do. I want us to be the Britain I grew up thinking we were." And I don't know why that makes me want to cry, but I haven't given up on this idea of loving your country. And when I say loving your country, I don't mean the systems that your country upholds. I mean the real live people in it presently. I also want to live up to what I thought Britain was growing up. There's a misquote going around on social media right now that's something like the Queen saying, "Grief is the price we pay for love." And I think that she did say that, but she was quoting somebody else. Like, that's not her words. But this idea of grief is something that I think maybe I do feel. Now that I'm thinking about it, I do feel that grief. It's the price that I pay for loving a country that doesn't really love most of us back. It's the grief that I pay for feeling like England at least could be better than it has been, and that there is a lot of history of protest and anger among working class and middle class people that has changed the course of the UK in a way that the Queen never could. I feel grief because I want to love this country and the people that live on it and the ground that we stand on, and that is a kind of love that the royal family fail to live up to every single day that they are here, and that is the kind of grief that I am mourning. It is also a kind of valid grief, and if you are feeling that way, if you are feeling sad, not for the Queen dying in a very natural way, in a very painless way at the end of her life, as I hope most of us will get to, but because we are so conditioned to focus on one person being so special and completely ignore the plight of so many, that is something to grieve as well. I want to end on a happy note. What could that be? I would love for you to chat in the comments about wherever your country is, the kind of country you would like it to be, the kind of country it fails to live up to, and finding a kind of patriotism that isn't patriotism at all. It's just care for the people around you and the land that you stand on. All I have to say, I guess, is we've been left with the wrong Liz. I don't trust her. Get mobilising and get chatting in the comments. This is a new era for the UK, so let's take an active stance in what we would like it to be. Thank you so much for watching this video. Do subscribe if you'd like to be here again. This video and everything like it is funded by the Gumption Club, who tip me per video retrospectively to make sure that they keep happening. I upload every Monday at about 6 PM. Today I've been sad. Mostly it's fun.